if you understand this possibility, then it must also be the case that you see yourself somewhere in relationship to the possibility. That unless you're experiencing the truth, unless you're aware of yourself as awareness, and that awareness of yourself as awareness is something that has become the natural state. Sahaja is a word for the natural state. It's become the natural state. Then everything that's spoken of here and everything that you could read in the scripts of the teachings in the East or any of the mystic teachings would be obvious to you. Be obvious to you. And since I'm assuming that's not the case, that would mean that you're somewhere in relationship to the possibility. And wherever you are in relationship to the possibility should be a place that you could ask for direction, or you could ask for guidance, or you could ask a question about whatever it is that's happening for you. Unless, of course, you're already there, and then, as I said before, there simply wouldn't be any question. One way to make this business of asking questions and a useful exercise is to ask yourself, who is it that doesn't have a question? Who is it that doesn't have a question? It may be the case that in reality there is actually no personality, right? However, since that energetic field we call the personality has infiltrated your brain and your body, then we have to deal with that, right? So there is a personality, and in terms of functionality, there's a personality. That's personality is what's functioning in the world, isn't it, right? So why would it be that the personality wouldn't have a question in this context? Wouldn't have a question about spirituality or meditation? If you start connecting the dots, you'll see that. You'll see why would it be that the personality doesn't have a question. But don't forget the litmus test. Right? If your personality thinks that it's enlightened, right? The litmus test for that is that you're no longer experiencing any discomfort, meaning that you're no longer experiencing any suffering, meaning that you're no longer experiencing any conflict with life, conflict with any other people, conflict with the past, conflict with yourself, conflict with the future. And that you understand and you're very clear about the fact that non-duality is the truth, and you're living in non-duality, you're living that non-duality, and because of that there is no possibility for suffering. Now, if that's the case for you, then if the voice in your head says that you're enlightened, and that's the case for you, you're probably enlightened. But mostly not. But mostly that's very, very unlikely. But we talk about it as a possibility, right? And if it's a possibility, that's enough to create the carrot. That's enough for you to be interested in it. Even though the probability, as I said earlier, is that you are not enlightened, or at least that's the position you have about it. That's the the way you're being in life, the way you're being in the world is that you're not enlightened. Is that true? That's how you know if you're enlightened, or is the way you're being in the world enlightened. That's one of the reasons why one of my teachers said that if you want to see the truth about where somebody is in regard to their enlightenment, don't ask them, ask their wife or ask their husband. They could give you the right answers. And one of the reasons that that's the case is because the people that you're closest to, you can't hide your humanity from. The people you're closest to, you can't hide your the reality of your emotional ups and downs, right? You can't hide your tendency to impulsively curse the other person out, or you can't hide your depression, your times of being withdrawn, or your insecurity, or your uncertainty, or your confusion. You know, for the people that are closest to you are going to experience that humanity. Yeah.
You can't hide it from yourself either.
Well, if you're being who you are, there's nobody to hide it from. If you're being who you are it. It's not a quality you have. So there's nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide from yourself. If you are it, if you're being it. But the reason the people around you would be the best people to ask is because if you're having conflict, if you're still having conflict with life, if you're still having conflict in your relationships with other people, that's a good indication that you're not enlightened. And the thing about it is, it doesn't matter whether your relationship with those people is picture perfect. You know, it doesn't matter whether your relationship to those people is one where you get along fine all the time and there's never any conflict. It doesn't matter whether your relationship to this person is not something that requires a lot of work and a lot of, managing your emotions, managing your perceptions. The irony is that the reason that all of that appears to be so is because most of us, even with the understandings that we come across, even with the teachings and the practices we come across, very few of us live consistently with an awareness that the appearance is an appearance. Very few of us live in such a way where who we're being is being who we're being because we see clearly the illusion, we see the dream, we see the appearance. What's the appearance? In the most absolute sense, the appearance is that everything that appears to exist exists separate from consciousness itself. The appearance is everything that exists appears to exist separate from consciousness. You do, I do, the world does, right? Separate from consciousness. So an enlightened person is somebody who knows that that's not true. That's an appearance. Time and space is an appearance. Your physical body is an appearance. Your functional behavior as a personality is an appearance. And all these appearances are constantly changing. It's called impermanence. All these appearances are constantly changing. And if you don't know that's an appearance, then you suffer because you're living in an appearance. And in that appearance, you are separate from other people, and in that appearance, you are a physical body, and in that appearance, you are a personality, living in a story. But that's not an appearance for people who are living in that world. It's not an appearance. It's reality. So again, enlightened person is, all an enlightened person is a person who sees the appearance. It's like a person who sees a mirage as a mirage, right? They're not going to try and get any water. A person who sees that an appearance, that life is an appearance, will not try and get from an appearance what an appearance cannot deliver on. Will not try and get peace from an appearance that is clearly not very peaceful, right? Not to try and get the experience of contentment or satisfaction or happiness from an appearance that is a situation that is in constant flux and it's completely unpredictable. So that's one way to kind of know where you are in this process, if you're really interested in fulfilling on the possibility, is to notice whether or not you recognize the appearance as an appearance. Part of that appearance would be your appearing as a body, you're appearing as a personality, other people being separate from you. That's what you're dealing with, because you're living in that appearance as though it's a reality. It's just like when you're sleeping and you're dreaming. When you're dreaming, you're living in that dream as if it's a reality, right? But it's not. It's being produced by the mind, right? And the reality of it is, even from a scientific perspective, as we know today, that the world that you're seeing that is considered to be the real world that you're in when you're awake is being produced exactly the same as the dream. The brain is producing that, producing the illusion of space and time, producing the illusion of being separate from the world and so forth. So that's a world that you can spend your life in. And that world is a world that inherently involves suffering. It's a world that there is inherent conflict with life, inherent conflict with other people, confusion, misery, insanity, hopelessness, futility, and resignation. And the thing about enlightenment is that the realization that enlightenment involves is a very simple realization, and that's the realization that the illusion is an illusion. That's the realization that the appearance is an appearance. That's all that has to happen. How hard can that be? To continue to see things that you're seeing, so you see the same world, right? But now you know what you're looking at. Now you know what you're looking at. You know that what you're looking at is something that's being generated by your brain, generated by your mind. And part of what's being generated is the idea that you're a character in this movie that's playing. I mean, isn't that the case? Isn't your experience, this is kind of interesting, isn't your experience, because the ego is naturally egocentric, right? In other words, the ego, you're experiencing yourself as the center of the world, aren't you? Yeah, you're the center of, So you're experiencing yourself as the star of a movie, aren't you? Your life is a movie. It's got all the elements of a movie, right? It's got the beginning of the movie, the middle of the movie, the end of the movie, right? It's just like a movie. And it has all the elements of a movie. There'll be loss, there'll be drama, there'll be suffering, right? Won't be as good as the movies that you go to pay to see now with all the computer technology. You know, they can have giant dinosaurs fighting King Kong, Godzilla. They can make these things look so real now that you couldn't generate a better nightmare for yourself. But this is what's cracking me up recently. You and I could never generate some of the amazing spectacles that are produced in the movies having to do with different and exciting ways to kill each other. Right? We could never come up with that stuff. It costs millions of dollars for all those special effects, all those people, thousands of people being killed. We could never come up with that. So that's why we have to pay to go see it. You know, so we can see what it would be like if we were so creative we could create that degree, that kind of diversity in murder. Oh.
Do you personally have those feelings at times of this gap between the idea and the total experience?
No. You know why?
Why?
Because they're the same thing. There's no conflict with it. It's the same thing. You can continue and see, this is the thing that people get stuck with, right? If I were to snap my fingers and you were to be completely enlightened, right?
Right.
Everything would be exactly the same as it is now.
But there'd be a shift in behavior.
Or there wouldn't. I don't know.
But you had described an enlightened person as one that would be existing without conflicts, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So then your behavior would be one where there'd be, your personality would have far less or no conflict.
Well, you may not have conflict, but find it necessary to act out in a very obvious way in certain situations in order to express yourself. And at the same time you're doing that, you may not have conflict. So right away people say, okay, well, if I'm going to be this way, then all these behaviors that go along with that should change.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case. If you're going to be this way, who you're being, where you're coming from is changing. What you do will probably change, but not in the ways that people imagine it will.
So you're driving down Route 1, a guy cuts you off. You, as an enlightened person, don't get emotional about it. You just accept it. Well, he had a bad day.
Now this is a very important thing I want to point out here, right? If you're driving in your car and you, as an enlightened person, gets cut off by another driver, right? The key, if you can get this, Bob, this will be it. This will be it. The key is that the person driving the car, whether they get angry or not, doesn't matter to the enlightened person. The enlightened person allows the brain to continue to do what it does, and it is a stimulus response machine. So if it gets stimulated in a certain way, the response may be anger. It's mechanical, it's automatic, right? So an enlightened person knows that. So when that happens, the enlightened person just sees it for what it is. For them, it's not, I am angry. For them, it's like, oh, anger has arisen.
So there's not a connection to the anger.
Yeah, the connection to the anger is anger has arisen. That means I'm sensing it in my body. Right. And there's a thought that may come into the mind, you know, oh, that son of a bitch, he cut me off. right? But an enlightened person just witnesses that happening, knowing that that's just the brain and the mind reacting, right?
Would it be the same for somebody who is depressed?
Yes. Yeah.
What was the question?
Would it be the same for somebody who is depressed?
And this is a very important thing, because this, if somebody who suffers from anxiety or depression can really understand how this works, it can resolve that. Because in the same way, if you say, well, somebody cuts me off when I'm driving, you know, I get angry, right? And I said, well, yeah, but you see, the enlightened person sees it not that I get angry, not that I am angry, it's, oh, anger has arisen. Anger has arisen. I am not angry, therefore I am still calm. The anger has arisen in the body, anger has arisen in the mind, you see? Because now there's consciousness there, there's the self is there. Right?
So it's a reaction like these pure non-dualists would have then. Life is just happening.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It just happens.
Yeah, it's just happening. And that doesn't mean that you can't, that doesn't mean that you won't continue to experience life as a person in a body. Because earlier you said, you know, that I don't have a body, right? No, but that's not the case. You have a body, right? It's just that you're not the body. It's not that you don't have a body. If you don't have a body, the game's over, right? If you don't have a piece on the board, you can't play the game, right? So, but you have a body. That's difference. You have a mind, but you're not your mind. Right? So when things play there, right, you can see what's happening for what it actually is. It's not something that you get caught into, pulled into, and believe everything that's going on in terms of what happens in the mind.
So you don't have you have a body, but you are consciousness. You're not that body.
Yes, the body appears in consciousness. Check it out.
If I'm not in this room, does this room exist?
Does it matter to you?
No, not at all.
Well, there you go. Why bother with that? See that, you know, if you study physics, you know that this is a thought argument, you know, these are right? But as far as I'm concerned, the more important question is, does it matter? If you could snap your fingers and the world would disappear, right? Would it matter whether it's still there to you?
Oh, sure, because 7 billion people would be impacted on it. So it would matter.
Well, you might think it would matter, right? But the recognition that it simply doesn't exist anymore means that everything about it doesn't exist either.
So it's kind of like a tree falling in the woods then. If I'm
Exactly.
there,
It's
yeah.
exactly. It's like, it's not a question of, see, the thing is, what it boils down to is whether the world's going to be here after I die is a stupid question. It's a relevant question because it won't be here for me. Isn't that really the only relevant aspect to talk about?
Yeah, but it should be somewhat significant that you have family that is going to survive you.
Apparently.
You have an apparent
Appearance. It's an appearance. Look, if you go back to the first concept, right? All there is consciousness, right? If that's true, right? Then that means everybody and everything that's happening is consciousness expressing itself. That's what's going on. If you want to call it God, you could say, that's what Ramesh Balsekar says. Everything that's happening is God expressing God's self through 8 billion people, 8 unique minds and bodies, doing all the things that they're doing in the world. But there's nothing happening outside of that. See, this is the realization. You are that, right? God broken down into, or consciousness broken down into all these specific forms doing what they're doing, right? But all of you are that. All of you are that. And there's nothing outside of that. And this is the key to understand that if you are life, if you are life, if you are that, if you are non-dual, right? If you're not separate from anything, if you are that, and there is nothing other than that and nothing separate from that, how could suffering be possible? Because it means, if you are that, it means that you're the murderer and the victim. You're Hitler and the Jews. Because that's all there is. Now you can't ask the question, why would God do that? You can't ask the question, why would God do that? Because it's all God.
Could you interchange the word life for God? It's all life.
Yeah, sure.
You could use any term.
That's right. It's all what it is. It's all the isness. It's all consciousness. It's all God. It's all life. It's all happening. It's all happening.
That woman Tollefson that you mentioned, I've seen a few of her videos, and she talks about boundaries. And she said, when you're sitting in a chair, try to feel if you can get a sense of you touching the chair, you connecting to the chair. Do you feel the boundary there? And her point is that you can't get a sense of that. It's almost like you and the chair are one thing, or your feet on the floor are one thing. Is that getting into non-duality?
Of course it is. If you look around this room, right? If you look around this room, what do you see? You see different shapes and different forms, right? That's what you see, right? But do you see any of it separate from the rest of it? This is like physics. Do you see anything that you see separate from the rest of it? You know why? Because it isn't. It isn't. It's all consciousness. There is nothing but it. There's nothing aside from it. There's nothing separate from it. That's why there can be no suffering. But if you think you're separate from it, well, then you have to suffer. Because now there's everything that's happening, and you, poor you. But if you see the truth that you're not separate from it and you are it, does the ocean suffer when the waves break? Does the ice cube suffer when it melts and becomes water?
But does the people suffer when there's a pandemic?
Apparently. It wouldn't be a good movie unless we had pandemics and, all the other stuff
But
that's...
where's the happy stuff in the movie?
It just happened. The only happy stuff that is the real deal, that is constant, that's not dependent upon what's happening in the movie, right? Is to experience that you are all the players in the movie, and you are the movie, and you are the script, all happening at the same time.
And you're the observer of the movie.
Of course. Isn't that the ultimate, to be the observed and the observer at the same time? Talk about having some fun.
But I think the way Balsakar put it was that consciousness or God writes the movie. But in truth, the way you look at it this way is we write the movie.
Well, in truth, all of that separating things out to talk about them is just the way we have to deal with it in time and with concepts. All right. But when you break it all down, right? God's the creator of the movie. God's all the actors in the movie. God's everything that's happening in the movie. God is all there is. That simple thing, see, that's the deal. If you could actually live with that truth being the governing principle for your life, that God is all there is, you couldn't help but be enlightened. Because that happens to be true. Whether you want to call it God, or whether you want to call it consciousness, or the source, or the unified field, or, cosmic law, the words don't matter, right? What the words are talking about is something that we all know beyond the words, don't we? We all know beyond the words. And that's something that we're talking about that we all know beyond the words. The thrill and the happiness that's possible is the realization and the experience that you are that. You are that. The awareness that's occurring for you right now, just consider it. The awareness that's occurring for you right now, that awareness that you've been experiencing 24/7 since you took your first breath, that awareness that you're experiencing right now, consider the incomprehensible reality that is. We go so quickly into this tranquilized obviousness. I love that concept. In life, human beings go so quickly into the tranquilized obviousness of everything, including the miracle of their own awareness. Right? You go so quickly into the tranquilized obvious of everything. I know what's going on. It's obvious what's going on. I know who you are. I know what this is. It's obvious. That tranquilized obviousness is this everyday, ordinary world that you're so clear is real. That tranquilized obviousness. And in the heart of the matter of that tranquilized obviousness is that it covers over the absolute inconceivable miracle that your awareness is, that's going on all the time, right? That is incomprehensible that it's happening. It's incomprehensible that it's happening. That's the whole teaching. Is that which is incomprehensible that it's happening is you. You're the mystery. Your consciousness itself. Your whatever that is you. And you're not separate from anything. And with that being clear, you can still live in your ordinary everyday life and enjoy it. And enjoy it. That's your job. That's your script. All right, any other questions before we convene this meeting?
Doesn't there seem to be something impersonal about this, though? Like, everything's just happening?
Yeah.
I mean, that tree is just happening, you're just happening.
Yeah.
There's no emotion.
There's no emotion to it, which...
Well, wait a minute. When you say there's no emotion, how do you get that there's no emotion? Emotions are happening.
Well, you're just aware.
They're happening. It's not just that you're aware. What you're aware of is happening. See, the thing is, it doesn't exclude anything. You can't do anything about having emotions. So how could you tell me there's no emotions?
Well, if I see, let's suppose something happens to a family member and I get depressed over it, I can say that depression's just happening. I guess that would lessen the emotion if I just see it that way.
Yeah, but if who you're being is the person and the personality, And then you say, oh, I can just say that it's just emotion happening, right? That's the personality trying to strategize, right?
Right.
But what I'm saying is if you're clear about what's actually happening, right? The emotion just arises in awareness. You're not depressed. Depression arises in awareness. You're only depressed when you claim it to be you.
And you only suffer when you claim it to be.
Of course. I am depressed. There it is. I am depressed. If I am depressed, then, oppression, it's not that depression is occurring in my awareness. No, I am being depressed. So then I have to act depressed.
Suppose someone has an addiction. Do you explain to them addiction is just happening?
No, that would be stupid to explain them that they'll need a drink, right? No, but you can work with people to help them to see that all things that arise in awareness aren't happening to you. That's what the ego does. It claims everything to be it, right? So I may want to drink. That's the ego talking, right? But when you start to wake up and see things for what they really are, within the awareness, the craving arises. Now that's not I want to drink anymore. That's different now. That's something that I have space with. That's something that I am bigger than. Right? But when I claim it, that I need a drink, now there's no place to go.
So when that craving happens, what do you do?
It depends on where you are in the process of being awake and knowing the truth. When that craving arises, what you do with it, if you've been in and out of rehab a few times, you probably go to AA and get some support, to control it. But if you do see, this is an interesting thing. When you go to AA, you begin with dealing with the addiction by controlling it, right? And having a lot of support, going to meetings every day, calling, having a sponsor, right? All that. But if you do the 12 steps, the way they're meant to be done, that control becomes unnecessary. Because the heart of the matter in AA is you give your life over, you give yourself over to a power greater than you, right? Well, isn't that the same thing we're talking about? And so if you go through that process, as you're going through the 12 steps, you're giving away what you thought was you to the source, right? And if you go through the 12 steps, it's not necessary anymore to control anything. Because you've discovered the reason why you were drinking in the first place was because how miserable you were at controlling anything. And then you experience that you can be happy and you can be relaxed because there's no need to worry about controlling anything because you never did and you never will. And then you're not so stressed out that you have to drink.
These people that get addicted to opioids, do they have support groups for that?
Yes, of course. That's what NA is.
NA is for that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the ultimate solution, which is consistent with AA, right, is to discover the real source of the problem. Doesn't that make sense? Discover the real source of the problem. If you deal with the real source of the problem, then you don't have to escape from it anymore. If you discover the possibility of being happy, you don't have to suffer because you're not happy. And then nobody can sell you the stuff that they tell you will make you happy. I sent a link out on the email list a while back about Leonard Cohen and Leonard Cohen's Zen master. Some of you may have seen that, right? His Zen master was a famous Zen master who lived to be, I think, 103, and he was the Zen master at Bald Mountain where Leonard Cohen spent some time. Right? And he was also the master of the teacher that I met up in Ithaca that I've continued to be related to. So he was a pretty famous Zen master. And one of the things that Leonard Cohen talked about was that when he got together with the Zen master, and the Zen master wanted to have some leisure time, he would want to break out the scotch, right? And the Zen master only drank Ballantine scotch, which is $500 a bottle. And so Leonard Cohen wrote about the fact that the Zen master liked to get drunk on scotch, right? And that this Zen master eventually was removed from his position of being the Zen master for Bald Mountain because of his inappropriate involvement with young women when he was over 100 years old. See, so, but the reason that I want to tell you those things is because, you know, people have these ideas about Zen masters, you know, about the idea that, you know, that they would not be interested in partaking in in good whiskey, or they wouldn't be interested in partaking in any sexual pleasure. That's not at all true. That's not at all true. The difference is, right? The difference is that their way of relating to those things, right, is not that there's anything about that they need to control. Those things are you know, a good Scotch whiskey can be experienced as a very pleasurable aspect of living a human life. You know, good sex, no matter how old you are, can be considered to be a good aspect of living a human life. So it's the context. The reason that it's not whether you drink or not. It's not whether you enjoy sex or not, right? It's what is your relationship to those things. If your relationship to those things is that you're clear what the source of your happiness and satisfaction and contentment is, you can still enjoy those things, but you don't have unrealistic expectations from them, you see. You don't have the idea that they're going to produce an experience they can't produce. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy them. You see, it's the middle way again. Always comes back to the middle way, you know. But you don't have to avoid the pleasures of life in order to be spiritually awake. You can enjoy them more than ever because you're spiritually awake, because you're no longer attempting to get something from them that they can't give you. But you can get what they do give you, you see? So that ought to cause enough confusion for a while.